So tell us a little bit more about your practice. It's called Studio Kathryn Larsen. When did you establish it, and what are you focusing on in your business?
So I formally established it in October. So on paper established. But I've kind of been working, I guess you could say, like under my own name on the side of working full time in the industry since around 2018. And that's when I really started doing the research on thatching with seagrass from the island of Læsø. And that was something I came across while I was in Denmark. They called it seaweed thatching, but it's actually thatched with seagrass, which is it's a plant that grows underwater. It's confused often with seaweed. It's very similar, but distinctly different enough that you can thatch with it, and you should not thatch with seaweed. But anyway.
Why shouldn't you thatch with seaweed?
It's really prone to rot. But seagrass is, if it's properly prepared, is actually rot resistant. So that's the thing. I stumbled across this material while I was in Denmark. I never knew any of this. I was just like, how do you build with this? And like all the information was like in Danish. So there was like a language lock, and I was like, oh, it's obscure, weird Danish too. I guess I better start studying. So I came across this in 2016, and then by the time 2018 rolled around, my Danish was kind of good enough that I kind of started reaching out to craftspeople and like, hey, I'm trying to research this for school, but actually I'm totally obsessed with this. Like, can you tell me more about it?
So what about it? What about seaweed, or not seaweed? You called it
seagrass.
Seagrass, sorry. So what about seagrass was so enticing to you?
Well, so I started studying about it, and I realized that it's rot resistant if it's prepared correctly. It insulates pretty comparably with mineral wool. And I also found out we had a really long history of using this as an insulation material in the US. Radio City is actually insulated with eelgrass. There was a very primitive insulation bat from the beginning of the 20th century in the US called Cabot's quilt that was seagrass sewn in between two sheets of cardboard. That product actually traveled from America overseas to Europe because I found articles from London where they're installing this product.
Wow, that's fascinating.
In like the 1920s. And I also found it described as a solution in a 1950s Danish construction handbook. So, I mean, I started like really tracing like the history of this material. And what I just found so fascinating is like after the 1930s, it just vanished. And it vanished because there was a global wasting disease that attacked most of the eelgrass around the world, around the Northern Hemisphere. So because it started washing up in different locations than before, it was a little bit less predictable of a resource. We then fully switched to synthetics mostly. And that also coincided with, you know, the 1950s, the age of modern materials, and also all the
plastic revolution.
Plastic revolution. All the modernists were like, we're going to build with plaster and concrete, and this is our style. This is modernism. All this old stuff is old and fussy, and we don't want to build that way anymore. We're modern. So I mean, when I came to the Netherlands too, I found out they built dikes with it.
How?
From the Middle Ages, they literally lined massive dikes with the seagrass because it was rot resistant, and it also would clump together. So it was a form of erosion
protected
control.
Wood.
So yeah, it protected the side of the dike from erosion. Okay. So they just lined the side of the dike towards the land with massive, like literally a meter thick of seagrass that would then clump, turn silver, and harden, and would keep everything kind of in place. So they say now in the Netherlands, at even some concrete dikes today, are actually the center of them is an old seaweed dike or seagrass
because they
dike.
just added to the previous layers.
Yeah.